Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gooey's Dungeon Dive, the podcast where I, Gooey, rank all of the dungeons in The Legend of Zelda. And things are heating up as we head into the depths of the Fire Temple. The Fire Temple sits within Death Mountain's crater, and so, of course, it is a fire-themed dungeon. Many of the rooms contain lava pits, firewalls, and even flaming enemies meant to burn us up. Similar to the Forest Temple, the structure of the building plays off the element it represents, but it also seems to be crafted for some sort of ceremonial purposes that you only get a vague impression of. I always like the mystery behind that. The soundtrack to this dungeon, while it's not my favorite song in the game, it does get that point across pretty well, as it has like kind of this percussive part that sounds kind of like your typical fire themed tune, but then there's some creepy vocals that come in and sort of like howling over top of the track. Of course, it's pretty notorious for, you know, having changed the theme from the original version of the game, but I think it gets this point across still with the replacement theme. And of course, we're not here just because it's the next level, the next dungeon, the next temple, and we gotta free someone to gain their power. No, we have a more personal connection once again, similar to the Forest Temple. After saving the Goron people as a child and forming a brotherly kinship through them with their leader Darunia, we're now drawn to the Fire Temple to help him free his people, who have all been captured to be fed to a mythological monster long thought to be dead. Darunia rushes in to take this creature on, asking us to find and free his people. And that's probably the most key aspect of this dungeon. The most memorable thing is seeking out and freeing the Gorons, who are all locked away within various parts of the dungeon. In return for freeing them, all the Gorons give us valuable hints and tips to various puzzles and challenges throughout the dungeon, and all of their cells contain chests with keys in them, which are vital to progression, of course. The navigational aspect of this dungeon is not quite as difficult, though. I do see this as somewhat intentional for a few reasons that I'm going to go over here. The first reason is what I just mentioned, the Goron hunt and the storyline involved within that. This is, of course, a major focus throughout the dungeon, though there are more things at play. Another element that seems to be key in this dungeon is that there appears to be a room-by-room focus on memorable puzzles or set pieces, stuff like that. So some of the puzzles are neat, even if they get repeated again and are a little less interesting. Some of the puzzles are rudimentary and maybe not what I would expect out of a dungeon this far into the game, but still I cannot deny the excitement of running away from a firewall that's following your tail, or running through a flaming wall maze before another flame wall comes up to block your way. I think the set piece nature of this dungeon is meant to work in tandem with the Goron rescue element. But I also think what is the main navigational feature of this dungeon is the verticality, the height. So as I mentioned, the Fire Temple rests within Death Mountain's crater, and you can actually see a lot of the structure from outside of the dungeon. It appears as these two spectacle rock looking volcanoes. I think it's spectacle rock. And the structure of this dungeon actually resembles that from the inside, which is very cool, I think. It reminds me a little bit of Thieves' Hideout in A Link to the Past. The entrance to the dungeon itself is actually deep below the lava pit of the crater, and the two major rooms that form the bottom floor of this dungeon are filled with lava themselves. Now, the rest of the dungeon is pretty linear, but it has us ascending the levels much like you would a tower-based dungeon. There's a few rooms that are obviously over previous parts of the dungeon, and if you fall, it's definitely a pain to get back up. Farrar's Wind is key here, I would say. While again, I think the intersecting rooms is kind of cool, falling down and backtracking is more annoying than something like even Tower of Hera in A Link to the Past. With how primitive the platforming is in this game, there's only so many rooms where don't fall can really be that fun, but thankfully that doesn't really overstay its welcome. It's really alright. But I do love that element of ascending the volcanoes. There's a few puzzles that they do kind of spoil that could have made good use of this feature. For example, there's one room where you see a Goron locked in a cage and he cannot be freed. And the way to actually get to him is by bombing and dropping down from a few levels above. I feel as though the cracked floor, along with maybe using the compass to position yourself above the room with the chest contained within that cell, would be enough of a hint. But also Navi gives you a hint about the floor as well. Am I being a little too harsh about that though? I'm not sure. There's a little bit of that element too with the dungeon item, which is the Megaton Hammer. It's cool from a story perspective. It's some ancient Goron weapon that they had used to defeat the monster who menaced the Gorons in their legend, but I don't necessarily find any of the puzzles or situations it's used in to be that exciting. It's pretty obvious what areas you need to use it, and none of them really recontextualize the dungeon that much in any kind of satisfying way. Returning to the entrance with it to get an earlier teased boss key is kind of cool, but that's about it. The thing I was just speaking on about spoiled puzzles and maybe lackluster use of the hammer, that all ties into the big set piece puzzle of this dungeon, which is actually pretty memorable, but not necessarily a great puzzle. In what's kind of the first room that you really have to go in this dungeon to progress, way down at the bottom level of one of the volcanoes, there's a large pillar that's stuck in the ceiling, and the Goron in that room tells you you have to do something about that pillar from the room above it. Now, much later in the dungeon, there is, of course, a pillar way higher after you've ascended the volcano. Now, when you're in that room, Navi basically reminds you that you are in that room from above earlier. Maybe I'm just kind of a map fanatic, but I feel like you could figure this puzzle out on your own by either looking down at the floor or, of course, looking at your map to see this. Not to mention the big strange pillar in the room. But bear with me, because there's a little bit more to it than that. Because after you get the hammer, you do a series of puzzles that kind of train you to use it on anything you see, really, but especially these platforms that have these weird faces on them, reminiscent of A Link to the Past, obviously. After that, we are basically led right back to that room with the pillar again, but this time right above it, and you can see that face marked very clearly on the top of it, just begging to be struck, which causes it to collapse and make this platform in that original room that goes to the boss room, which is pretty sick, especially when you jump down that hole and fall all the way down to the room below. But I don't know. Maybe use the dungeon item on everything after getting it isn't that exciting to begin with, but I also feel like this one would be better without all of those hints. Again, it makes for a lot of cool moments, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, not as clever to me. Maybe I'm just being harsh too, though, let me know. That, of course, though, leads us right to the boss, the subterranean lava dragon Fulvagia. Fulvagia is pretty epic looking for a boss, and the setting is pretty cool. It's in one of those, well, subterranean lava chambers. Makes sense. The battle has her coming in and out of these various lava holes in the ground, and you play a classic game of whack-a-mole with the Megaton Hammer. She'll also come out of the ground and shoot flames that do a lot of damage and drop rocks on us. Maybe this could be tough for a new player, but I don't know. I don't think it's a very difficult boss myself. It's a little bit more style over substance, but that's kind of this dungeon. That's kind of its whole deal. The battle doesn't really change too much. It cycles between the phases, and honestly, after repeated plays, the phase where you just have to wait for her to finish doing her thing and come back down gets a little bit old. Still, it's overall a very memorable experience and a memorable dungeon, even if it's not one of my absolute favorites. After defeating the dragon Fulvagia, we return to the Chamber of Sages and meet up with our old pal Darunia. He tells us, "Don't forget, now you and I are true brothers." And he grants us his power through the fire medallion. So with ranking this, I mean, you could tell I'm a little mixed on it. I think it's cool, you know, the gauntlet nature of it. It's got the similar gauntlet nature that some of the other, like, climbing the tower ones do, and it's cool that it's like, what if there are two towers? And it's got a lot of cool, like, there's a lot of cool extras, and you know, there's a whole, like, the top of one of the towers that mirrors the Megaton Hammer has like this whole gold skulltula thing in it, and the whole like Scarecrow song thing that I didn't even really mention much. But I can also see this reminds me a little bit of some Wind Waker dungeons, which I think we'll get to, where it's more about the individual puzzle in each room and kind of building off each other. But I kind of mentioned it, but like there's some rooms where you do a kind of puzzle, like you do one with like dropping a bomb to hit a switch to climb up an area, and then you just have to like do it later, but it's like less interesting. So I'm kind of mixed because it's like moment to moment, and some of the moments are cool and interesting, and then some are not as much. And I'm kind of mixed with the falling down. I think it is a little annoying in this, but I don't know, it doesn't really happen to me as much. And yeah, again, I don't have a problem with like linearity. You know, this has a little bit of non-linearity where it's like, oh, you gotta find 2 keys, and I don't know, there's a couple of rooms where you could like get tripped up for a second, but it's overall not too difficult. But yeah, I don't know, it's impressive, similar to Thieves Town, just in the way it plays off the overworld, like I mentioned, and like kind of feeling like a place, and like the story elements stick really strong. But like I don't think the navigation or puzzles are that necessarily strong. And again, the big gimmick puzzle, I could be wrong. Let me know if you feel like this is a good puzzle or not, but I feel like it's not great. I do think it's maybe I was gonna say maybe it's better than the Dodongo's Cavern one, because the Navi hint's optional, and I don't know. I do think a lot of these dungeons actually, like for me, live and die off of their big set piece puzzles. But so far, I don't know, I'm feeling like the Great Deku Tree, I love it in all its simplicity, and I think it's worse than that. If we're going baseline Ocarina of Time dungeons, looking at the list, I know people are gonna say you rank the Deku Tree too high, but I think it's perfect. I think the puzzle with it and it is so solid. I know I got Forest Temple above it, but I think so far that's kind of shown some stuff that you can really do in a 3D game that would maybe be a little difficult to convey that in 2D with like the twisting rooms and stuff. So that's our kind of stronger Ocarina of Time dungeons so far. And then yeah, so I think I do think if I'm trying to gauge, this is gonna be a hard one. This might be one where I re-record my part, but I think I could like honestly see myself. I could put this above Thieves Town, honestly. I think Thieves Town is really cool, and this has a similar gimmick, just in that aspect of geographic, feeling like a place. And there's definitely more to it than this. I do kind of appreciate the even bigger simplicity of that, but this kind of combines that with a tower element. It's kind of funny, Thieves Town even has the thing with like freeing someone who's imprisoned, and the puzzle in that, the big puzzle in that with bombing the hole to make the light and leading blind there, while it's a little goofy, it's kind of cooler. Oh shoot, you know what, no, yeah, I'm gonna put Thieves Town above the Fire Temple. Whew, okay. Now, oh god, trying to compare it to Death Mountain or the Great Palace. Oh man, Death Mountain is so cool though. You know what? No, I'll keep it here. I'll keep it right here in between Thieves Town and Death Mountain. I don't know what it is, but I think this seems like a solid spot for it. I could, by the time I'm done editing this, my opinion may have changed, but it's hard to compare to those really, but I feel like I can give it props over Jabu Jabu, and it's under Deku Tree for me. And then above it are kind of these pretty cool, interesting A Link to the Past dungeons, but not the best ones. And so this is kind of that, but for Ocarina of Time with me. Let me know if I'm wrong. that's my ranking. That's what it's gonna be. Man, I don't know why this was a tough one. It's just weird not to like. It's weird to be so mixed on a dungeon, anymore. Like, I don't even know. I like this here. This is good. This is good. Let me know if you disagree or agree with my opinion. And, next week we're gonna have a dungeon that I think really shows off what 3D dungeons could all be about. So, come join my Discord if you want to talk more about the games, the dungeons, and I will see you. Oh, you know what? Oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna do Ice Cavern before Water Temple. Well, shoot. I'll see you next week. We'll see what I'm doing. Goodbye.